Honest J. Nowak. Coming at you live. Alright. A pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome back to Honest J. Nowak Graphix. So, without further ado, let's get ourselves a bit of an extensive look at a somewhat more recent title out there. One that came out in August 2020, Transformers Battlegrounds. This was pretty much the third Transformers game that we were able to get on 8th generation consoles, with the other two being Transformers Rise of the Darkspark and Transformers Devastation. And I tell you, I've gotten to know a lot about both of those games, but Battlegrounds is a lot more recent. Rise of the Darkspark was released in 2014 to keep in the continuity with the Transformers Bayverse, but also to serve as a sequel to Transformers Fall of Cybertron from 2012. Then you have Transformers Devastation, which came out in late 2015, as a way to pretty much pay homage to the classic G1 series while also giving us some modern day anime style graphics. And then you have Transformers Battlegrounds, which is meant to be more of a game that's based off of the more recent Power of the Spark cartoons, which we're able to find on YouTube nowadays. But with Battlegrounds, you have a lot more things that are different. Rise of the Darkspark plays a lot like a third-person shooter, and then you have Devastation, which tends to act like more of a combat game, which is almost similar to that of what the Batman Arkham games were like, or with various other things that happen with a third-person perspective. But here, it's a whole lot different. It's an overhead perspective with a large gridlock sort of thing out there. It's actually a bit of a different game as opposed to many others. It's meant to be more of a strategy puzzle game in a way, where you move different characters along on a map, a gridlock sort of thing out there, very akin to what you could play on a game of checkers or chess or anything else that moves along like a checkerboard sort of thing. But the thing is, with Devastation and Rise of the Darkspark, those gameplays are different, and Battlegrounds is basically more of the puzzle strategy game in comparison to the others. The story and premise sets on a random human survivor who comes way too close to a certain battle that goes on between the Autobots and Decepticons, and is eventually given access to allow to watch from the skies and give out certain commands relating to strategy and the like, where the different Autobots can move together in order to defeat certain Decepticon forces that are on Earth and various other locations that take place. This game really does give us a lot of focal points that happen within the most recent of all the continuities that have taken place. The fact that the Power of the Spark cartoons were very much akin to what you could possibly expect as like a giant crossover between most other continuities. And let's also not forget that the casting here is almost indeed similar, but it is still kept in line with the continuity of the Power of the Spark as well, because most of the same actors are in play, including the almighty Jake Fouché. Yeah. In case you hadn't already noticed, then well, Jake Fouché actually once made a video of different voice impressions. And then it came out to a point where Fouché could actually be Optimus Prime for real. And well, that seems to be what had happened. The same guy who did some voice impressions on Optimus Prime years ago eventually got invited along by Hasbro to see if Fouché would be comfortable voicing Optimus Prime, especially if Peter Cullen were to go at some point. Well, you know what? I'd say that's pretty impressive. At some point, if I were to, let's say, do a voice impression on Vegeta, maybe if somebody were to invite me to come over and portray the character of Vegeta in a live-action Dragon Ball Z film, then, well, I'd be perfectly fine to go along with the role. But anyways, you know what, though? Other than the casting, other than the way that this game tries to pay a little more loyalty over to that continuity, it's pretty much what you'd expect. For something that's like Gridlock or chess or checkers or various other games that happen to move along on a grid of some sorts like that, this game actually does feel a bit average by any means. Because the thing is, you do get yourself a fair amount of difficulty. You only have 3 turns to take place. You can use those 3 turns to basically move your Autobot around to certain distances, but you can only go so far before it does not allow you to go any further than a certain point. So, and once you use up all your turns with one Autobot, then it automatically moves over to the Decepticon's turn, where a CPU, or AI, as you will, implements their own performance, either by moving their character around or being able to use their attacks either long range or close range. The real goal is to defeat all the Decepticons or get all your Autobot characters to the other side of a certain map that takes place. And these maps, of course, can vary with certain shapes, certain sizes, certain obstacles that you'll need to get past, around, under, over, pretty much. And then, of course, with the Decepticons, there usually are a certain amount that takes place. During the first few stages, you do get some practice rounds taking place, with some on-screen instructions that can take place, allowing you to easily get a hold of the kind of gameplay and also what could take place. And you do get to play as a pretty big variety of different Autobots, from Optimus Prime to Bumblebee to Gridlock to, wow, many others pretty much. RC, Wheeljack, and even the more recent, well, Windblade, pretty much. Plus some others that would occasionally come up, but then of course you got most of the Decepticons taking place, like Megatron and Starscream, as well as Shockwave and Soundwave. So, it's a pretty basic setup, pretty much, for the game itself. We probably could have had a bit more variety with character selections and all that, and maybe there probably could have been some other adjustments that should have taken place, but otherwise, I'd say this is a pretty decent game, at least for something that you could pick up for 40 bucks and beat within about 6 hours at most. And it's probably no wonder why. Maybe there's probably a lot of things that you could indeed try to figure out, or maybe try to correct in some certain way. But hey, you know what? At least for the time that I played it in January 2021 and December 2020, pretty much, those time spans pretty much just took under a week pretty much to finish. I will say that it was actually a pretty decent way to go through with the whole entire thing itself. I already had a pretty busy schedule throughout December 2020. I had a lot of other games I was playing as well, like Ghost of Tsushima, NHL 20, and Fallout Shelter, and not to mention Kingdom Hearts 3. I was also prepared to go play Monster Jam Steel Titans, revisit The Last of Us Part 2, as well as Street Fighter V, the Champion Edition, and not to mention, I was even getting ready to play Dragon's Dogma, Dark Arisen. So, if you think that that's not crazy enough as to how many games itself I was willing to play there, then well, you're probably not going to look at a lot of things the same way as you probably used to. But anyways, that's going to be it for today. And I will say that this has been quite a nice ride so far, but yet there are tons of other games out there that I'm hoping to talk about, and I'm hoping to give a pretty fair sort of critique taking place from this point on. So if you want to see more go down on my channel, then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.